A city sitting in the middle of a lake, feeding 300,000 people with zero supply chains, zero chemical inputs, and 7 harvests a year, while the rest of the world was struggling to pull off one. This system ran for over 3,000 years, and when Europeans showed up in 1519, they did not study it, copy it, or try to understand it. They drained the lakes and burned the records. Here is what they were so desperate to erase.
One of the most common examples of companion planting, intercropping, or a guild that people reference is the Three Sisters, which is an integrated planting of maize or corn together with squash and beans, which was developed and used by some indigenous peoples of North America.
Somebody cracked the code to food that grows forever, and the ones who destroyed it went out of their way to make sure you would never know. In 1325, a civilization pulled off something wild. They built one of the largest cities on Earth in the middle of a lake. No dry land, no open fields, nothing but water for miles. Within 100 years, over 200,000 people were eating meals that came straight from that lake, grown on floating islands made from mud, reeds, and rotting plants. None of it shipped in, none of it traded from somewhere else. All of it grown right there on the water. And those tiny islands produced harvests 7 times a year. Your nearest farm manages 1, maybe 2. So how did people with no machines, no chemicals, and no electricity outproduce operations that cost billions to run? That question should bother you, but it gets stranger. This growing method was already running for over 1,000 years before the Aztecs even used it. Confirmed fields go back to 1150 CE, and the planting techniques behind them stretch at least 3,500 years across Central America. Somebody quietly perfected the most productive food method in human history, and when Europeans landed in 1519, they tore it apart piece by piece. What replaced it feeds fewer people, poisons the land beneath it, and depends on supplies that are running low. What came before ran on sunlight, lake water, and a cycle that fixed itself every season without anyone buying a single thing. Your school skipped this chapter for a reason, and that reason tells you everything about who wrote the textbook. What would you say if someone told you the smartest farm in history ran on zero electricity, zero fuel, and sat on top of a lake? Growers in the Valley of Mexico wove thick mats of reeds and branches, drove stakes through them into the shallow lake bed, then piled dark, rich mud from the lake bottom onto the surface. Once the pile broke above the water line, they had an island, somewhere between 6 and 10 meters wide, stretching up to 200 meters long, with narrow canals of moving water running between each strip. Now pay attention to this part because it changes everything. Those canals worked like a free irrigation system. Water and decomposing organic material crept straight into the roots of whatever was planted, so nobody ever needed to carry a single bucket. Maize, beans, squash, tomatoes, chili peppers, amaranth, flowers, all on the same plot. Fish, frogs, and ducks lived in the canals surrounding them, so each island doubled as a complete food supply with protein built in. Willow trees went in at each corner. As roots dug into the lake bed, the whole raft locked into place and became permanent land. Fresh canal mud got scooped back onto the surface each season, and that move alone renewed the growing beds on a loop that never ran out. Billion-dollar farms today still cannot figure out how to keep producing without killing what they plant in. By 1500, thousands of these islands circled Tenochtitlan, with dams, sluice gates, and flood control managing the water. Chinampa producers even paid lower taxes than other farmers because the empire could not risk losing that food supply. None of that even gets into what these growers understood about how plants talk to each other underground. You plant corn, beans, and squash in the same pile of dirt, and something happens that took modern scientists thousands of years to understand. Somewhere between 3,500 and 7,000 years ago, indigenous growers across Mesoamerica and North America figured out that these three crops, planted together, each grow stronger than apart.
One of the most common examples of companion planting, intercropping, or a guild that people reference is the Three Sisters, which is an integrated planting of maize or corn together with squash and beans, which was developed and used by some indigenous peoples of North America.
They called the combo the Three Sisters, and all the testing modern labs have thrown at it confirms what those growers already knew. So what actually happens in that mound? Corn grows tall, giving bean vines a natural pole to climb. Beans pull nitrogen straight from the air and push it into the dirt, feeding corn and squash without a drop of fertilizer. Squash spreads its wide leaves across the surface, blocking sunlight from weeds and locking moisture into the earth. 3 crops, 3 jobs, and the dirt walks away healthier after each round. And if you think that sounds too good to be true, the lab results say otherwise. Cornell researchers copied the Haudenosaunee technique from New York State exactly as those communities practiced it. Mixed plantings kicked out more energy and more protein per hectare than any single crop alone. A separate study across 357 plots in the western highlands of Guatemala backed that up. Milpa fields outperformed pure cornfields on both calories and nutrition. All 3 crops combined deliver the full set of 9 amino acids your body cannot produce by itself. Right now, massive operations plant 1 crop across entire counties and spray chemicals to kill weeds that a squash leaf blocks for free. One of those approaches builds the land up while the other eats it alive. And guess which one we picked? And buried under a jungle that nobody thought contained a single farm, there is a type of dirt that does something so strange it confused researchers for 100 years. Take a scoop of this earth, drop a seed in, and whatever you planted will grow faster and stronger than anything from regular garden dirt. Scattered across hundreds of old sites in the Amazon basin, strips of jet-black earth sit surrounded by the pale, washed-out, almost lifeless reddish ground that covers the jungle floor. People living there have known about it forever, but Western researchers only paid real attention starting in the early 1900s. They called it terra preta, Portuguese for black earth, and spent decades trying to figure out why nothing else in the region could match it. 3 times the organic matter of neighboring ground, loaded with phosphorus, calcium, nitrogen, and carbon. Crops bounce back in just 6 months of rest compared to the 8 to 10 years normal jungle terrain demands. But the part that broke everyone's brain, the earth seemed to regenerate on its own, gaining about 1 centimeter per year in a place where non-stop rain should have washed all of it into the river. How does dirt grow back? That question haunted scientists for decades. So who created this stuff? Communities living between 450 BCE and 950 CE mixed slow-burn charcoal with food scraps, animal bones, crushed pottery, and compost, layering it into their land across generations. That charcoal, now called biochar, traps carbon in a form so stable it lasts millennia, feeding the microscopic life that keeps nutrients cycling. A 2023 study from Science Advances proved Kuikuro communities near the upper Xingu River are making fresh terra preta right now using those ancestral methods. Cornell's Johannes Lehmann calculated these techniques could triple crop output in barren regions while capturing up to 12% of humanity's yearly carbon pollution.
Soil carbon will be recognized as an important and the most important carbon stock in the terrestrial environment.
A food-growing, dirt-healing, atmosphere-cleaning recipe that ran for thousands of years. And the colonizers who showed up after decided to wreck it on purpose. Tenochtitlan was feeding more mouths than almost any city in Europe, and that self-sufficiency made the people with guns very uncomfortable. Hernán Cortés arrived in Mexico in 1519 and found a Chinampa network operating at full speed. Between 200,000 and 300,000 people living in one city, multiple harvests rolling in each year, clean canals everywhere, food coming from the water on a cycle that renewed itself. So what did the Spanish do with a system that clearly worked? They tore it down to the foundation. After the conquest of 1521, they went beyond just winning a war. They emptied the lakes that kept an entire civilization alive. Every canal, every waterway keeping those floating plots fed got drained so they could drop European-style buildings on top. New Spain rose directly over Tenochtitlan's bones, and Chinampa food production at that scale vanished almost instantly. Ask yourself why someone would drain a food system that works, and the answer tells you what colonization was really about. Down in the Amazon, a slower wipeout played out across generations. European diseases killed an estimated 90% of indigenous populations, and with those people went all the knowledge about terra preta and companion growing. The only reason any of it survived at all? Small communities on the edges kept planting the old way, passing instructions by word of mouth, far from colonial attention. Colonial governments in Guatemala and Mexico pushed single-crop export farming and forced communities off land their families had worked for centuries. Across North America, displacement policies tore indigenous nations from territories where three sisters growing kept them fed for generations. All of those food systems got ripped out and swapped for something that looked productive on paper. But the hidden bill for that swap, nobody bothered calculating. You eat every day, but have you ever stopped and thought about what happens when the dirt that grows your food just stops working? A senior official at the UN Food and Agriculture Organization dropped a number that shook the entire agricultural world. At current rates of damage, usable topsoil could be gone within 60 harvests. A 2020 Oxford study complicated that figure and argued some regions hold up better than others. But even the most optimistic research landed on this. Roughly a third of all topsoil worldwide has already been damaged, and regenerating just 3 centimeters of it takes about 1,000 years under natural conditions. Read that again, 1,000 years to make 3 centimeters. How fast is it vanishing? About 24 billion tons of fertile earth disappear annually, which breaks down to 1 soccer field of usable ground gone every 5 seconds. And every single cause on that list, chemical overuse, single crop repetition, deforestation, overgrazing, runs in the exact opposite direction from what ancient cultivators practiced. Project those numbers forward and the picture turns scary. Usable land per person by 2050 falls to 1/4 of what existed in 1960, right as the global headcount pushes toward 9.7 billion. Chinampa farmers fed their beds from the lake bottom each season. Milpa planters let beans cycle nitrogen back on their own. Terra preta builders trapped carbon permanently. All three cost nothing, renewed themselves, and ran on zero outside inputs. We chose the opposite path, and the tab is already printed. What most people have no idea about is that the original methods never fully disappeared. South of one of the most crowded cities on Earth, there are canals older than the country itself, and people are still planting on them each morning. How is that even possible after everything you just heard? Xochimilco sits on Mexico City's southern edge, and roughly 22,000 acres of Chinampa land still stretch across it, connected by a canal network running for centuries. Plots built during the post-classic period survived the Spanish conquest, and many still produce food today. We are talking about farms older than most nations still pulling in real harvests. Walk along those canals and you will see lettuce, cilantro, spinach, squash, radishes, corn, and more coming off these island beds. Canal mud goes up, crops pull what they need, organic material washes back into the water. Same loop that worked 700 years ago, no upgrades needed. A wave of small Chinampa ventures now sell directly to city buyers who want food raised without synthetic chemicals. One operation called La Chinampa a tu Mesa delivers produce to doorsteps in Mexico City. You can literally order groceries grown on a method older than the printing press. International agencies flagged Chinampas as a model for dealing with weather shifts and fighting poverty. Floating garden projects based on the same idea now operate in Bangladesh during monsoon season and in Chicago through the Urban Rivers Initiative. So why are we still acting like this is ancient history when it is happening right now? Cuicuro families in the Brazilian Amazon keep making fresh terra preta with ancestral techniques. Farmers across Mexico and Guatemala still plant milpa with the three sisters each season. Living methods feeding real people while lab teams worldwide scramble to figure out what billion-dollar ag operations keep getting wrong. That scramble turned into something way bigger than research papers and academic conferences. What if you found out that the most exciting new idea in agriculture is actually 3,000 years old and someone just slapped a new label on it? Biochar, the product built directly on the Terra Preta playbook, is pulling in serious investment. Embrapa in Brazil and startups across the global south sell charcoal-based soil boosters using the exact chemistry Amazonian families perfected over 2,000 years ago. Slow-burn organic matter, mix it into weak ground, and the earth recovers while carbon leaves the atmosphere. That should sound familiar, because you heard this exact recipe 5 minutes ago. Cornell's Johannes Lehmann laid it out in a 2006 presentation. The Terra Preta formula could restore barren land, triple its output, and expand crop ranges into places where almost nothing grows. That knowledge was already underground. Researchers just had to stop assuming ancient peoples were guessing. Intercropping data backs it up. A recent meta-analysis confirmed polyculture setups like the Three Sisters produce a 22 to 32% yield advantage over single-crop fields. In Guatemala's western highlands, milpa workers growing corn, beans, and squash together matched monoculture caloric numbers on 0 purchased fertilizer and 0 herbicide. So why is this still considered an alternative when the data shows it outperforms? Chinampa-inspired floating farms are under testing in flood-prone regions worldwide, and in 2020, the Cherokee Nation placed ancestral seed varieties into the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, protecting genetics that predate European arrival. Not one of these new breakthroughs is actually new. The answers modern science keeps chasing were solved by communities who carved them into the land itself. And whether we pay attention in time is the only part of this story that has not been written yet. YouTube picked out a video it thinks you will want to watch, and it is on screen now. If you stuck around this long, hit subscribe. If any part of this story hit different, tell us in the comments. And if you are ready for the next one, tap the video on your screen right now. See you there!